This is the map of the United States. In the northwest corner of the state of Arizona, close to the borders of Utah and Nevada, lies a jewel that attracts millions of visitors yearly and through which the Colorado River runs. The Grand Canyon has inspired countless photos with its breathtaking landforms. While the Grand Canyon continues to delight visitors from all over the world, it holds a special draw for scientists and researchers because of the many discoveries contained within, including ones that are shocking. In this video, we explore a new discovery in the Grand Canyon that shocks the whole world. Every year, an estimated 5.9 million people visit the Grand Canyon, making it the second most visited national park in the United States. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park in North Carolina and Tennessee receives approximately 12.5 million visitors annually. One thing about the Grand Canyon is that it is vast. Did you know that the Grand Canyon is 4,931 square kilometers, or 1,904 square miles in size, which is about 1,218,375 acres. It can swallow the entire state of Rhode Island, which is only 3,144 square kilometers, or 776,960 acres. Another big thing about the Grand Canyon is the numerous wildlife. The Grand Canyon is home to 373 species of birds, 18 species of fish, 58 species of reptiles, and 91 species of mammals. There are over 8,000 known species at the Grand Canyon in total. 7 of these species are critically endangered, including the Ridgway's rail, California condor, southwestern willow flycatcher, razorback sucker, humpback chub, and Kanab amber snail. The Grand Canyon so impressed American President Teddy Roosevelt during his visit in 1903 that he knew the next step was to protect it. He established the Grand Canyon Game Preserve with a presidential proclamation in 1906. Scientists were shocked to discover that 1 billion years' worth of rocks went missing in the Grand Canyon. Who carried out the heist and where was the loot taken to? The Grand Canyon stands as evidence of history through rocks, with each layer depicting a certain period that went by on Earth. How would it seem to discover that rock layers dating back over 1 billion years are missing from the Grand Canyon's geological record? Named the Great Unconformity, the anomaly was initially detected by geologist John Wesley Powell in 1869. He saw the strange gap as he journeyed down the Colorado River. Years later, geologists were able to date these layers, which led them to confirming the Great Unconformity. Experts found out when they noticed some rocks dating back to 1.4 to 1.8 billion years ago were next to rocks that are 520 million years old. So what happened to the rocks that are missing within this strange gap? A team of scientists brought forth an explanation for the phenomenon in a study. Their study suggested that the Grand Canyon's geologic history is more complex than we think, and some parts of the Grand Canyon might have transformed in several ways across the millennia. This transformation could have caused some rocks to get washed away into the ocean. In a bid to find out the reason for this anomaly, the team came up with some analytical methods for their study. These methods allowed them to figure out the Great Unconformity's missing history, and this was done using thermochronology. The process of thermochronology uses several chemical analysis techniques to measure the heat stored in a rock when it was formed. The outcome obtained from this research data suggests that some events might have caused the strange gap in the geological record. The event was believed to have happened alongside the harsh breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia, which occurred roughly 633 to 750 million years ago. This period must have been a tumultuous time for Earth's tectonics as it affected rock layers and left them unbalanced. Also, the samples analyzed by the team showed that the Grand Canyon had experienced different geologic deformations compared to the eastern half of the canyon. They figured this out when they saw that the basement rock in the canyon's western half seemed to have risen to the surface about 700 million years ago, but in the eastern half, the same layers of stone are buried under several kilometers of sediment. Although the outcome of this study is not enough to judge the case of the Great Unconformity once and for all, the team believes that this is one giant leap ahead in the quest to solve the mystery behind it. Meanwhile, not everything found in the Grand Canyon has earthly origins, as there have been reports of UFO sightings in the area. Amazingly, this sighting report is accompanied by a video which those that have seen it described as just amazing. The UFO, or unidentified flying object, was filmed over the southern rim of the Grand Canyon. According to UFO expert Scott Waring, this region of the United States is rife with UFO sightings. Waring enthused that the video footage will astound anyone who sees it. The video shows a white orb or disk in the air with a dark center. Waring explained that the dark center was the alien pilot of the UFO observing the humans below him. Waring, who studies UFO sightings and other strange phenomena from his home in Taiwan, believes that the UFO video can teach us about how alien spacecraft move and hide from our sight. He was stoked by the sheer amount of information in this single video. The video was originally posted to the Mutual UFO Network before being shared on Waring's blog, ET Database, and YouTube channel. The organization gathers and investigates reports of UFOs and other extraterrestrial phenomena from around the world. According to eyewitnesses, at approximately 7:21 p.m., over a dozen tourists observed a stationary circular object with a hole in the middle hovering in one location to the right of the moon near some clouds for over 30 minutes. Video and photographs were taken with a Samsung phone and will be uploaded later. This happened while visitors were standing on the Grand Canyon's south rim near the Bright Angel Trails next to the gift shop, looking westward towards the moon. The UFO then vanished behind some clouds. The video received some positive feedback on YouTube, however, some speculated that it was a weather balloon. One viewer said, "Very interesting. I wonder if aliens hire interstellar vacations and get to visit natural Earth wonders over the planet, as there are many nice planets to see." And even when the discoveries in the Grand Canyon originated from the planet, it can still leave scientists scratching their heads, as with the discovery of ancient objects belonging to a long-forgotten Egyptian civilization that came from an entirely underground people. We trace the story back to 1909 when G. Kincaid, a Smithsonian Institution explorer, discovered strange caverns during an expedition led by Smithsonian anthropologist S.A. Jordan. The cavern's entrance was nearly impenetrable, but Kincaid was able to enter and make an incredible discovery. The massive caves which radiated out from a central cavern like spokes on a wheel were filled with artifacts such as statues, copper weapons, and even seed granaries. Its size indicated that 50,000 people could live comfortably inside. Even more astonishing, the artifacts did not correspond to anything in the known record. Rather than looking like Native American artifacts, the objects had distinct Egyptian or Tibetan designs. Naturally, there were lots of questions. Could there have been an entire Egyptian civilization living there? If that's the case, how did they get there? When the story broke in the Arizona Gazette, it caused quite a stir and it was quickly met with opposition. The Smithsonian allegedly lost all records of either the scientists or their discoveries. Since then, no one has been able to locate these ostensibly massive caves, allowing rumors that this was some elaborate ruse perpetrated by the Gazette to sell papers to persist. However, not all experts accept this explanation. Some claim that the Smithsonian Institution purposefully erased Kincaid and Jordan's names from their records and actively destroyed artifacts that contradict the status quo story of human history. And others even believe the caves contain a portal to the fourth dimension, where the figures who have secretly ruled the world for thousands of years will emerge. Others believe the area is top secret and heavily guarded, similar to the famous Area 51. So is this series of caverns evidence of a long-lost, possibly Egyptian civilization that the Smithsonian is simply covering up? Or is it a portal into another dimension for our unknown overlords? We'll let you decide. And things do get spooky in the Grand Canyon. With so many caves, there have been strong suggestions that these enclosures are haunted by ghosts. Yes, ghosts. Over the last half-century, 8 people have died or been buried on or near the Grand Canyon Caverns property, and another 4 have spent their lives and had lifelong emotional ties to the caverns. Employees and guests alike have recorded and witnessed unexplained ghost and paranormal sightings and activities. The most common sighting is of a man thought to be Walter Peck's ghost at the top and bottom of the elevator shaft, opening the doors at different times. When the caverns were used as a burial site for Native American Indians during the winter months was also of great interest. According to reports, the bodies have been removed, but the Indians' whispering sounds can often be heard in the caverns if one listens closely. And at night, in the darkness of the caverns, you do hear things that, according to reports, are not supposed to be heard. Overnight guests in the cavern suite have also reported seeing shadows of Indian figures moving in a circular dance formation on the rocks, as well as distant chanting. Other reports include seeing images of a body being hung at the top of the caverns. A person actually did so 30 years ago. And even more chilling are the ghosts of the Altovar Hotel. The Altovar Hotel is perched on a bluff 20 feet above the south rim. When it opened in 1905, it was a pinnacle of luxury in the midst of an unforgiving wilderness, and it's seen hundreds of thousands of visitors in the century since. Over the years, employees and guests have reported strange occurrences at the hotel, including a painting that follows the viewer wherever they go, a phantom wandering down the front stairs and across the property before disappearing, and a friendly, well-dressed gentleman greeting guests to a holiday celebration on the third floor. However, it seems some visitors and workers never left the premises. Exiting through the front doors and heading slightly left across the circular drive to a small stand of vegetation will yield one of the hotel's signature mysteries. A small flat gravestone engraved simply Pearl A. Ward, 1879 to 1934. Pearl's identity has been heavily debated. Pearl, according to stories passed down by word of mouth, was a cowboy passing through the area. Other accounts identify her as one of the famous Harvey Girls hostesses who lived, worked, and died on the property of Fred Harvey's hotels. Visitors and staff members at El Tovar reported seeing a black-caped figure leaving the hotel's front stairs, hover near the grave, and then disappear behind Hopi House. Another well-known spectre is an elderly gentleman who is said to be Fred Harvey himself. Although Harvey died in 1901, 4 years before the hotel opened to the public, many visitors have reported being invited to the third floor's annual holiday celebration. Guests have also reported having other unique experiences, such as a couple visiting from New Jersey. Mark Griffith reported that his wife felt a presence in their room, one that pulled on her clothing in the middle of the night. Another couple from Los Angeles walked past their television to see an old man with a gray beard staring back at them. There have also been reports of ghost sightings tied to an aviation disaster that claimed the lives of all on board, all 128 of them. The tragic mid-air collision occurred between two planes over the Grand Canyon on Saturday, June 30, 1956 at 10:30 a.m. What was already a tragic accident was exacerbated when the fate of the planes was unknown for several hours due to a lack of airspace over the canyon and the lack of homing beacons or black boxes on either plane. Flight 718 made the last contact, sending a garbled transmission that was later determined to be the pilot declaring, "Salt Lake R718, we are going in." Then was heard screaming, "Pull up, pull up, pull up." As a result, it was the next day before rescue efforts began, but it was really more recovery efforts at that point. And due to the severity of the impact, no bodies were recovered intact. They were unable to positively identify the majority of the remains. On July 9, 1956, a mass funeral for the TWA Flight 2 passengers and crew was held at the canyon's south rim, and 66 of the 70 recovered remains were interred in a mass grave at Citizen Cemetery in Flagstaff, Arizona. They buried 29 unidentified victims of the United flight in 4 coffins at the Grand Canyon Pioneer Cemetery. Since then, there have been reports of spirits dressed in business or city attire wandering through Crash Canyon. According to some reports, people are speaking as if nothing is wrong, while others are confused, crying, or looking for loved ones who were there on the plane with them. There is also the spirit of Reese Griffiths, a former Grand Canyon employee. He was a member of the blasting crew. He enjoyed his work at the park and expressed a desire to be buried in the Grand Canyon after his death. Those wishes were granted following his untimely death in February 1922 while working at the park. He was laid to rest between Phantom Ranch and Black Bridge. Visitors have reported seeing his spirit walking around the trails in that section of the Grand Canyon since his death, and others have reported seeing a small light hovering over his burial site. The most common sightings come from campers of the North Kaibab Trail. While not supernatural, visitors to the Grand Canyon have reported sightings of a huge but strange monster known as the Mogollon Monster. I.W. Stevens was the first person to cite this monster, according to his reports to the Arizona Republican newspaper in 1903. He described the creature, which he named the Wild Man of the Rocks, as having long matted white hair on its head and a long matted white beard that reached its knees. It also appeared to be covered in gray hair on the majority of its body. Stevens stumbled upon it while it knelt over a recently killed cougar, eating the meat of the dead animal. Despite Stevens' claim that he was extremely still and quiet while watching the creature, it appears that the creature sensed his presence when it quickly turned, locked eyes on Stevens, and let out the wildest, most unearthly screech he could imagine. This outburst of rage from the creature prompted Stevens to pack up and hightail it out of the canyon and return home for safety. Another encounter with this creature was reported by Don Davis, who later became a cryptozoologist. Davis was 13 years old at the time and a member of the camping scout trip. He and his troop were camping near Tonto Creek when something woke him and a few other boys up late at night. It sounded like someone was rummaging through everyone's belongings. When the intruder stopped and turned in his direction, Davis, thinking it was another boy, yelled for the scout to stop and go back to bed. The unknown visitor approached Davis, who was ensconced in his sleeping bag, and stopped directly over him. Davis drew his sleeping bag over his head, hoping that the terrifying unknown creature would leave him alone. The monster eventually lost interest in the scouts' makeshift camp and fled back into the wilderness. Davis described the creature's odor as extremely strong and terrible, and he described features that many other witnesses have seen. The Mogio monster stands around 7 feet tall and has a very large overall body build. Its body is covered in long matted hair that is black or reddish in color. The face, hands, chest, and feet appear to be hairless and have dark skin tones. The creature's hair appears to turn dark gray as they age. The head is almost square, with the eyes set deep in the skull beneath a large brow. The creature's upper arms are very large, about 6 inches in diameter, and hang down to the knees. The creature's feet, like most ape men sightings, are said to be enormous, with tracks measuring around 22 inches long. It walks with enormous, inhuman strides and sways its arms as if it has no trouble with different types of terrain. The creature's odor smells like a dead fish mixed with skunk and foul body odor. It also appears to be omnivorous and can be highly territorial. It is not afraid to approach people aggressively in order to force them to leave its claimed territory. Many campers and hikers in the Mogollon Rim area complain that the Mogollon monster crept into their camp during the night and rummaged through their belongings. It rips open bags, throws furniture, knocks over tents, and steals food.
Recently, research conducted by archaeologists has unearthed what they believe are the oldest known human footprints on the North American continent. These ancient footprints were found in White Sands National Park, and according to researchers, these tracks are between 21,000 to 23,000 years old. These were buried under layers of soil in the national park. The researchers have determined that the footprints belong to a variety of people, and most of them were children and teenagers. Previously, scientists had assumed that the earliest appearance of humans in the Americas was 11,000 to 13,000 years ago on basis of the stone spears found across North America. These early inhabitants were associated with what we now call the Clovis culture. Tom Hyam, an archaeological scientist and radiocarbon dating expert at the University of Vienna, expressed his delight, saying that the evidence is very convincing and extremely exciting. He is convinced that these new footprints are genuinely of the estimated age. The team studying these ancient trackways excavated a total of 61 footprints, and most experts believe that the adults were performing skilled tasks at the lake edge, and the teenagers whose footprints were discovered were given the fetching and carrying tasks. It wouldn't be wrong to say that this discovery is a vital piece of evidence in the modern-day debate among scientists trying to ascertain exactly when humans first populated the Americas. Most of the limestone cliffs in the canyons have caves embedded in them. The Grand Canyon, as we know it, holds a lot of caves in it, with the insides filled with several remains of plants and animals, which gives us an insight into the region's past in the days of the Ice Age. The caves also vary in size, as some can be so narrow your entry position would have to be on all fours, while some are wide enough to have a dance session in them. Either way, these caves have been the perfect habitat for bats, birds, wood rats, now extinct mountain goats, and sloths. Yeah, you heard that right. The bones of some of these animals were found, and their bone-dry conditions created a wonderfully preserved environment. The well-preserved fossils allowed researchers access to 40,000 past years of history and to know what the world was like during the Ice Age. As scientists began to examine these marks of history, they started with Rampart Cave, located at the far western end of the canyon. Scientists found several dung balls scattered across the floor. At a glance, one might have thought that they were excreted in recent times, but they were made by a 500-pound Shasta ground sloth that had been extinct for over 10,000 years. When the dung was analyzed through radiocarbon dating, The sloth dung deposits were dated to be about 40,000 to 11,000 years old. Wild. Old matter detected in the dung also helped scientists to figure out the animals' eating habits. Pollen which drifted across the air was ingested by the animals. It also holds key hints about the regional plant community. Wood rat middens also served as tangible records of animals and plant remains left in neat piles and untampered with for hundreds of years. There are also several skulls discovered, skulls of mountain goats that have gone extinct, and even mummified birds. Steve Emsley, a professor of biology at the University of North Carolina and an expert on birds that existed in the Ice Age times, was a part of this expedition. He discovered some condors in the caves and was able to analyze them. His chemical analysis showed that the Grand Canyon condors were likely eating megafauna as a delicacy, but the megafauna went extinct, which could have caused death for the birds too. These are essential parts of the world's history discovered at the Grand Canyon.
In another discovery, a crew looking for a missing man found something else they didn't bargain for.
They were looking for a Hungarian national man who lived in Hong Kong. He was reported missing to Las Vegas police in July 2021. He vanished while traveling in the southwest US. The car he drove was found in a Grand Canyon parking lot in mid-August, and his body was found a few days later, nearly 131 meters below the canyon's rim at the Yavapai Point. Authorities determined that he died from a traumatic fall, but they don't know much about the events that led up to it. But it wasn't this man whose dead remains that shook the search parties. Instead, it was the remains of another person named Scott Walsh, who had vanished back in 2015. Scott was last seen getting off a shuttle bus at the park's south rim. His clothing reportedly blended in with the surroundings, and the body was positioned in a way that it was almost undetectable. Scott's body was luckily spotted during an aerial search for the Hungarian man. It was found about 182 meters below the Pipe Creek overlook, nearly 4.8 kilometers from where Walsh's day pack was found in 2015.
There is no denying that people lived in the Grand Canyon long before our time. However, when evidence of their occupation surfaces, it causes excitement.
The Havasupai tribe is a community that's inhabited the Grand Canyon for a very long time, as far back as 1,000 years when it was discovered. It is one of the smallest American Indian nations in the United States, and the only place mail is sent and delivered by mule. They live across a wide span ranging from the Bill Williams Mountain and east to the Little Colorado River. Their actual living locations were up and down the vertical layers of the Grand Canyon depending on what the seasons threw at them. During the summer and spring, the tribe farmed along the Tonto Platform, including the India Garden and other cultivable areas. Their farms produce corn, beans, squash, pumpkins, and melons. During the fall and winter, the Havasupai tribe lived on the Colorado Plateau, which is located on the level of the canyon's rim. Having resided in the areas around the Grand Canyon for 1,000 years, the tribe did not come across any European explorers till Spanish priest Francisco Garces traveled to Havasu Canyon in 1776. Garces also traveled to the Hopi Mesas, and his reports shed light on another Havasupai village located east towards Moenkopi Wash, well beyond the Grand Canyon. The tribe also didn't have much of an issue with Euro-American intrusion until the late 1800s, when the Euro-American newcomers arrived at the canyon. They explored the trails set by the Hopi, Havasupai, and ancient Puebloans. While exploring, they discovered irrigation ditches, cultivated fields on the Tonto Platform, and named the region Indian Garden. The area bears that name to this day. The Havasupai's home began to gain attention, starting from the Santa Fe Railroad that opened a path to the Grand Canyon in September 1901. 2 years later, the canyon hosted President Theodore Roosevelt, who visited the canyon and journeyed down Bright Angel Trail. As he rode down, he met two Havasupais who lived with their families at Indian Garden. Roosevelt then informed them about a park that was soon to be created, and they would have to vacate the Indian Garden. One man of the Havasupai adhered to Roosevelt's request and relocated to a cave higher along Bright Angel Trail, but he still farmed at Indian Garden. The other Havasupai man remained at the Indian Garden with his wife. They stayed there until the National Park Service escorted them out forcefully in 1928. After this, the US government confined the Havasupai to a 518-acre reservation in Havasu Canyon, a part of their ancestral home. But this wasn't enough, and the Havasupai lobbied for more of their ancestral lands. Their requests were granted in 1975, with President Gerald Ford returning 185,000 acres of canyon and rim territory back to the tribe. Since then, they have adjusted to the new circumstances surrounding their new environment, and their means of survival are based on farming, tourism, and wage labor.
More shocking and devastating to the environment is the drying up of the Colorado River. The problem has been building for decades, but it has come to a head in recent years due to dangerously low levels in the river's major manufactured reservoirs, prompting the authorities to call for unprecedented cuts in water usage among the 40 million people who rely on the river. But why is this majestic river drying up? The Colorado River is drying up as a result of chronic overuse of water resources combined with a historic drought. The dry spell has lasted for more than 2 decades, owing to a warming climate caused primarily by humans' use of fossil fuels. In addition, hotter and drier conditions in the western United States have drained the river's 2 major artificial reservoirs, Lake Powell on the Arizona-Utah border and Lake Mead on the Arizona-Nevada border, to levels not seen since the reservoirs were first filled decades ago. In 1999, the year before the drought began, those 2 lakes held 47.6 million acre-feet of water, or about 92% of their capacity. They held a total of 12.9 million acre-feet of water this week, or about 1/4 full. An acre-foot is equal to 326,000 gallons of water, which is roughly the amount used by 2 to 3 average households in a year. The problem now is that the amount of water used by the 7 western states depending on the river and Mexico far outnumbers the amount of water flowing through it. The natural flow of the Colorado River averaged 13.4 million acre-feet between 2000 and 2020, and yet water consumption averaged 15 million acre-feet during that same time period. Water consumption has exceeded supply by 33.6 million acre-feet since the drought began. One of the most concerning dynamics in recent years has been the shifting relationship between snowpacks in the mountains and runoff into reservoirs. Last year, which was a good snow year, had about 90% of normal snowfall, but only about 60% of normal runoff reaching the reservoirs. Scientists attribute this breakdown to climate change, which has resulted in hotter and drier conditions in the West. Drier soils soak up more water before it reaches the lakes, and hotter temperatures evaporate more water and lengthen the growing season, allowing plants to absorb more water. Scientists made another discovery that reminds us that it's simply our turn to use the Earth's resources when they stumbled upon the Tusayan ruins in the Grand Canyon area.
The Tusayan ruins are located 3 miles west of Desert View Point, a region that marks the easternmost entrance to the Grand Canyon. It is one of the most outstanding spots discovered by archaeologists in all of Arizona. In a bid to entertain and educate tourists visiting the Grand Canyon, the attraction is composed of 2 parts: the ruin site and the museum. The ruins comprise the remains of an ancient Pueblo village, which officials at the national parks believe to be at least 800 years old. Close to the ruins of this old village is the Tusayan Museum. The museum houses several designed exhibits to enhance the tourist's understanding of the archaeological site and its ancient civilization. Along the tour of the ruins, experts believe there are facilities that have been used for different purposes, ranging from constructing and housing to storing food, and several tools used to perform several religious ceremonies. The Tusayan ruins were first excavated in 1930 by Arizona Puebloans, but there was a need to preserve the site for better study, which led to additional work done on the site in 1948 and 1965. Historians estimated that human civilization has existed in the Grand Canyon area in one form or another over the past 12,000 years. Within this period, regular human habitation has taken place in the area for approximately 4,000 years. As a result, there are likely countless archaeological remains existing in several areas of the canyon, but the National Park Service officials have only investigated 5% of the entire park thoroughly. Therefore, the Tusayan ruins and museums stand as the most complete archaeological work conducted in the Grand Canyon area, a fact that underestimates its historical prowess and importance to the Grand Canyon National Park. The Tusayan Museum, as it exists today, was completed in 1934 and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1974.
Modern humans have added their own touch to the Grand Canyon as well, although it's out of necessity. But we wonder what coming generations will think when they discover the underground suite in the Grand Canyon caves. Here is the story of the suite buried under the Grand Canyon. When the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1961 was still heating up, John F. Kennedy, the then President of the United States, took a step ahead to create a safe place for the people in case the bombs decided to rain down. In his search, he picked the Grand Canyon as a perfect spot. Kennedy ensured to move enough food and supplies into the caves to support at least 2,000 people. The food supplies were scheduled to last for at least a month, but since the bombs never dropped, the cave suites became tourist spots for visitors who visited the Grand Canyon. Located 220 feet below ground, the single-room suite is being maintained and operated by the above Grand Canyon Caverns Motel. It is located where JFK's emergency supplies are still kept fresh and usable even after 40 years of storage due to the cave's naturally dry climate. The suite shows several modern amenities including a television, a small library, double beds, a record player, and also running water. Although this suite is situated 220 feet below, it is not entirely private. The suite is on show as part of the attractions in the national park, so tourists pass through the room mostly during daylight hours. As a result of the suite's extreme depth, zero humidity, and complete darkness, nothing lives in the caves. There are no rodents, insects, or animals of any sort. So coupled with the insulation of stone, it makes this room possibly the quietest room in all of America. It can also be rented for $900 a night due to its peculiarities. Meanwhile, things can get so hot in the Grand Canyon that visitors' shoes literally fall apart. In fact, the National Park Service recently issued a warning to visitors that the extreme heat could result in melted shoes. The Grand Canyon's temperature was predicted to reach 112 degrees Fahrenheit. With a lower elevation, the heat would become more intense. Visitors were advised to stay hydrated and out of the sun. You can thank adiabatic heating, a weather phenomenon, for this temperature hike. As air sinks to a lower elevation, it becomes compressed, and compressed air emits heat as energy. As a result, the air mass became even warmer. This is why temperatures in the 90s can be found at the Grand Canyon's rim, but temperatures are 20 to 30 degrees hotter at the canyon's bottom. In addition, the high temperatures coincided with an increase in wildfires. The National Interagency Fire Center predicted that large fires would be above normal. While it is normal to bemoan the loss of your favorite trekking shoes, did you know that some prehistoric life forms were detected in the Grand Canyon? The discovery of these life forms started with a boulder that had fallen off a cliff. Alan Krill, a geologist, was on a hiking trip with his students as they moved along the Grand Canyon National Park's Bright Angel Trail. It was on this trail that Krill noticed a weird rock with marks on it. It was a fallen boulder lying on the trail's side, and it seemed to have markings that looked like footprints. A curious Krill who was visiting from Norway took some pictures of these markings and forwarded them to his old friend and colleague Stephen Rowland, a paleontologist at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. When the photos were examined, it turned out that Krill's discoveries were ancient fossilized footprints. From the analysis, Rowland suggested that the prints could have been 313 million years old, making the fossil track the oldest vertebrate footprint ever found in the Grand Canyon. It also proved as the earliest evidence of vertebrate animals walking in sand dunes, and it was proposed that this ancient footprint could have belonged to an amniot, a hard-shelled, egg-laying animal. So how was the footprint well preserved till it was discovered? The boulder that contained these footprints weighed 100 pounds and was broken apart from the Manacacha Formation. The Manacacha Formation is a large sandstone approximately 314 million years old. The ancient fossilized footprints formed when they became wet and were covered in sand after. The sand was a significant factor that helped to preserve the fossil markings for millions of years. These footprints were observed and scientists saw two sets of tracks visible on the boulder's surface. With all analysis from the study, scientists were able to locate the period when the footprints were as far back as 313 million years ago and estimated to be approximately 500,000 years old. Moving further into the footprint analysis, Rowland detected that the fossil tracks depict two different reptilian animals crossing diagonally over the spot. He also noted that one of the animals was about a foot long and used a lateral sequence walk. A lateral sequence walk is where an animal moves the left rear foot, then the left front, followed by the right rear front, and then the right front. Sometimes visitors to the Grand Canyon get more than they bargain for. like when they were treated to a rare occurrence that filled the massive expanse of land with mesmerizing fog, making it appear they could literally walk on clouds. The fog was trapped in the canyon by a temperature inversion which happens when the air near the ground is cooler than the air above it. Low temperature, clear skies and calm winds were brought to the Grand Canyon by a high-pressure system. During the long nights, the ground quickly cooled, chilling the air directly above it. Because the air higher in the atmosphere did not cool as quickly, an inversion formed. And because there was no wind to stir it, cold, dense air was trapped beneath a more buoyant layer of warm air. The inversion, however, is only half of the story. A winter storm had dumped heavy snow and rain on northern Arizona just a few days before. The Grand Canyon rim received 11.5 inches or 29.2 centimeters of snow, according to the National Weather Service. The snow and rain saturated the ground and the air above it. The water condensed into a fog as the air near the ground cooled at night, trapped in the canyon by the temperature inversion. The extent of the 2013 fog event is shown in the second image, captured by NASA's Terra Satellite's Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer, or MODIS. While temperature inversions occur a couple of times a year, fog covering so much of the canyon is unusual. The fog seeps into the eastern section of the Grand Canyon, conforming to the shape of the canyon walls. The entire landscape east of the canyon is shrouded in fog and low clouds. This wonderful event, however, is not one that lasts long, as it usually dissipates over a few days, with the only leftover being wet ground. Let's hear what you like most about the Grand Canyon in the comments section below.